Aha, the paper shredder. We're gonna pretend like I recorded this video a week and a half ago. Well, I guess I recorded the gameplay a week and a half ago, but then vacation struck, and then we're talking about it now, the paper shredder. So I somehow didn't talk about this weapon the first time it came around, like over a year ago, because, well, somehow, I say it like it was an accident. It's just not an impressive weapon enough for me to cover it at the time. Nowadays, if it's new, I like to chat about it. Now, the paper shredder really isn't as bad as I should be making it out to seem. It actually does a respectable amount of damage. So I'm going to talk about the pros before we get to the cons. Yeah, it's an explosive weapon that can be Sunbeam, which used to be kind of rare, but they're becoming a little bit more common, usually in the pistol variety, which is funny to say that because just by it being explosive doesn't mean that it does the damage of, like, a rocket launcher or something. However, it does do a respectable damage, like I'm saying. The copy that I have here does about 80,000 damage without the loadout, so it just gets better even with the right setup, and this is the loadout that I'm using. You can see it on screen, so you can already tell that it's actually doing pretty okay, but you can probably figure out just from watching what is exactly wrong with this weapon. You can't aim it, so it's a lot like the tiny instrument of death, where you can guide the rocket around and make it do loop-de-loops and whatever I decided to do for fun here. And that's actually kind of a perk for that weapon. You can guide the missile to exactly where you need it to be. Now, the paper shredder, on the other hand, while not only are you not able to actually control where it goes, but its range is pitiful. It's like 4 tiles or something, so you're gonna have a rough time hitting anything that's not right in front of you, which is actually funny because while distance is a problem, if you bring this into a crowd of zombies during, like, the defense, when there's a lot all at once, or if you're in an encampment, for example, this is actually an extraordinary weapon for that. Like, if you're specifically running this in encampments or areas with large crowds of zombies, this is a great weapon. It'll actually do really good. For, well, any other use case, this is gonna be a bad time. So that said, this weapon has become a little bit of a meme on my stream. So I have the 4,000 channel points on Twitch as of recording. This could change in the future. So, follow down below and check out what's going on. You guys can make me request weapons as of recording. And that has been a very, very popular choice using the paper shredder. And you can probably tell why. So yeah, my honest opinion of this weapon before we get into the perks is that it's good, like better than people might think. Its single target damage is okay. Its group damage is more what you're going after, but against the smasher, it's surprisingly not that bad. The only problem, of course, being your range and the fact that you can't aim it. So if you're going to use this weapon and you really want to make it work, let's talk about the perks. Now, this isn't going to surprise anybody. I mean, shocker, it's a crit build, but I always like to get into it because there are multiple ways to run this thing. So first and foremost, it depends on your 6 perk. I believe a lot of the event weapons can only come with 1 copy, but I'm not 100% certain how this is going, so I don't know if they'll all be affliction. So, like, they all used to come with the same 6 perk, so they were just kind of the same copy to everybody, but I'm not certain how the perks come on this thing. This is just an old copy. I don't even think I ran the missions to get the copy this year. I'm hoping that's still available. Maybe it is. You guys can let me know. But the 6 perk, you basically want snared or affliction. This impact and knockback magnitude, I cannot imagine any circumstance where that is useful to you. And then, of course, you're going to want to do the damage to afflicted if that's an option. Now, because you don't have damage to slowed and snared, there's actually another conversation at hand. So this weapon can have an extra crit damage perk, which makes a difference because with this weapon, you could go ahead and, realize that, all right, let me break it down. I've done this in every video where there's a single shot, but if you shoot into a crowd of enemies and you afflict all of them, so every single enemy took damage and they now all have the affliction bonus, your first shot actually does 0 extra damage. That 5th perk is a dead perk. It's not doing any extra damage whatsoever. And then on the second shot, everything has a 45% damage buff. And then on the third shot, you would have done a total of 90% extra damage, assuming the enemy is even still alive. Now, what I always like to say is if you would have just used a damage perk, you would have had that bonus from the get-go and it wouldn't have been a problem. So I like to bring up the fact that damage to afflicted works really well on, like, SMGs or ARs or something where you're shooting fast, but on a single shot weapon, snipers usually, but in this case a pistol, it might actually just make a lot more sense to go for a second crit damage perk. And that would be an interesting note because I'm going to steal again for the tiny instrument of death video because I went to all the effort to make this graphic here where everything highlighted in green was an enemy that got critted on and everything that is in red did not get critted on, meaning when you shoot into a crowd of enemies with an explosive weapon, this works for all RPGs by the way, every single individual enemy has its own chance to crit. So you actually have multiple opportunities, and this might be more useful to you than damage to afflicted. Now, as I always like to say with a crit build, you are rolling the dice, so if you don't crit on that enemy, not only are you doing no bonus damage, but you're actually doing less than that damage perk would have been otherwise. So if you're finding yourself incapable of one-shotting regular zombies without a crit, then perhaps you might want to consider an extra damage perk, and that is kind of the other ways to run it. So I've obviously recommended a crit build as a base here, but if you're using Totally Rockin' Out, just by the way, double crit damage is going to be more than fine here, and you probably, if you're using Totally Rockin' Out, don't even need the crit rating, and that damage perk might even be better off. However, for a regular all-around build, I might even recommend that second crit damage just to show you how it'll look. It'd be like that. I currently have it rolled nature, so if you're watching this video upon release or a couple of months hereafter, it appears as though we are in a water zone. So if this isn't a thing in the future, let me just show what it looks like. If I go to Twine, for example, this is the same adventures. Every single 4-player has the water modifier. I guess this is like a seasonal thing. They've done this before. It's kind of cool, I think. In my opinion, I like the idea of using the correct element for the mission at hand. And when missions are kind of randomized, you don't always know exactly what to go for, and it results in a situation where you have multiple copies of the exact same weapon with different elements on it, and that can be a little tricky, just switching between those every single mission. But since the entire couple of months is going to be water, well, hey, I'm just going to roll this nature. So if you're watching this in the future and you want to use the paper shredder, and you're out of season perhaps, maybe every enemy is going to be fire, and you want to roll this thing water. I don't know. All around energy is going to be your better pick there. Obviously, the reload perk needs to stay. This is kind of a non-negotiable perk. Like, you might not want a crit build. That's totally fine. Triple damage would probably be the way to go. Reload is definitely something that you want to be fixed on, because this weapon is funny because it says that I've got 216,000 DPS here, but it's looking at the fire rate, which is almost irrelevant because it takes you a full second to reload anyway. You're only shooting 80,000 damage per second because you take a full second to reload. So while it looks really high, like, wow, 200,000, that's comparing to the Lecter shock rifle. No, it's not. That number is not telling you anything important. And that is all to say that this weapon definitely needs a reload because it directly affects your damage output. For a lot of people who might be wondering, hey, what about that low chance to crit, 38%? What if I do double crit rating? This is where I'm going to get into a topic I've covered before, which is just diminishing returns, meaning the first crit rating buffs you to 38%, which is about a 28% chance to crit bonus. The second one, well, let's just check it out for science, as I got tons of reperk for whatever reason, goes up to 51%, which is only a 13% bonus. That is, well, every time I've checked on a calculator, every single time, I promise you, 13 has been less than 28, and that just kind of goes to show that that second crit rating perk is less damage than a damage perk would have been, it's less damage than a crit damage perk would have been, or honestly, I haven't done the math on this, but just conceptually speaking, a 75% reload bonus would probably give me more effective damage output than a second crit rating perk. So any other option is better. Just only do one crit rating, if at all. Now, that's why I also mentioned earlier with the Totally Rockin' Out loadout, where Totally Rockin' Out buffs your crit rating by so freaking much that it's actually not even worth it to have a crit rating perk. You might as well just use damage or impact or literally something else, just because it might not even be worth it with Totally Rockin' Out. But that should just about cover all of the options. You know, triple damage, crit rating, double crit damage, damage to afflicted. It kind of depends on what you got going on here. There's a lot of ways to run the paper shredder if you're trying to just have a fun time. It's not a serious weapon. This is just one of those holiday themed weapons. It's kind of cool and it could give you a good time. If you guys want to support the channel, feel free to use code Mista at your checkout. You guys can become a channel member here. Use those emotes down in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a nice day. And then